Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. In Book 5, Chapter 28 of his Meditations, Marcus Aurelius is going to say something that actually sounds a little bit funny at first, and it has to do with how we ought to respond to other people's failings, ways in which they offend us and other people, ways in which they ought to know better and ought to be addressing. So the question is, does it help anybody for us to get angry at those people and to behave angrily towards them? Is that going to fix the situation? Or should we adopt a different approach, a rational approach? And Marcus is going to tell us, yes, we should use reason. It doesn't mean that we should only reason with them. There's a lot of latitude for how this would take place. But instead of getting angry, we ought to work with them as a fellow human being. And so the example that he has here is of bad odors, right? So it could be a bad smell, literally a goat smell, right? A grason in there, right? So that's not good to smell like a goat. If anybody's ever smelled goats that haven't been washed recently, you know exactly what we're talking about. But we can imagine all sorts of other kinds of bad smells that people's bodies may exude. Or the person has bad breath, oxotomos. And so, Marcus says, don't be irritated at people's smell or bad breath. And actually, it's more than just being irritated. He's actually telling us, don't get angry. Meti orgidze, right? So this is coming from orge, the word that actually means the emotion of anger, all the way from irritation to rage. So, you're sitting in public transport or an Uber or a taxi cab or, in a classroom next to somebody or in a restaurant, and you get a whiff of them. And you're like, oh, geez, that person's ripe. What's going on here? You shouldn't get angry at them. Instead, you should adopt a different approach. And, one initial way of thinking about it, Marcus says kind of humorously, is, listen, they've got that mouth, right, that stoma, right, those particular armpits, and so that's probably where the smell is coming from. So of necessity, ananke, he says, this is the Greek word for necessarily, or, it can't go any other way. So the translation here is they're going to produce that order. And the word that's actually used there is for yielding, like an investment. They're going to yield that kind of smell. It's going to arise, it's going to develop, it's going to happen from them. And that's, just physics. It's chemistry, it's biology. It's the way things work. It's the way the universe is organized. People don't wash up. If they don't attend to personal hygiene, they're going to stink. And there's really no two ways about that. I mean, they might get lucky for a while and not stink, but sooner or later, they're going to develop a ripe odor. And so, you could look at this as, well, this is just the nature of the universe. But then you can make a response. You can say, well, sure, but these aren't just animals. These are human beings. Human beings ought to, as a human being, they possess this faculty of reason, logos. This is what differentiates us from the other animals. So, they're capable as he says, of thinking things through. Dunatai is being capable, and they can actually exercise their minds. They can wrap their heads around it quite literally, thinking things through, thinking, why don't people like me? Why, maybe I do smell a little bit bad, right? Maybe I should do something about it. They can think about the offense or irritation or problem that they're creating. And the Greek here, pleimele, is really quite interesting because it has to do with not harmonizing well with other things. Screwing up, for example, a song, right? So here, they have a brain. Can't they figure it out? Can't they recognize the problem? As a human being, they ought to be able to recognize a problem. So Marcus says to himself and to us, his readers, well, you also have reason. You also have logos. So, you shouldn't just get angry as a sort of stimulus response sort of thing. You should not behave just like a mere animal either. He says, you have a brain as well? Good for you. Use your logic to awaken his. Quite literally, move, kineson, right? Change, alter a rational disposition, logike diathesis. Each person has a possibility for using this rational part of themselves. Take your rational part, use your rational part, and move that other person's rational part. Get it to respond to your own as best as you can. This is what you should be trying, not just yelling at them, not shaming them, not arguing with them, angrily or anything like that. And he says, show the other person or demonstrate to the other person, deixon, display to them, remind them, recall things to their mind, hupomneson, help them to understand the situation that they're in. A lot of times when people give offense, they don't realize what they're doing. And it can be helpful to have somebody else approach them in the right way. If you just get angry at them, then they're probably going to be defensive and they're not going to be cooperative with you. You're not actually helping yourself. You're not helping anybody else. You're not helping the offender within the situation by losing control of your temper. Instead, you have the opportunity to appeal to this higher part of them, the rational part, by using your own rationality in how you engage with them. And if you do this, it's not a guarantee, right? But there's a much greater possibility for something positive coming out of it. So he says, if this person listens to you, which is not a guarantee, then you can actually help them. Therapeuses. This is a term that we get therapy from, right? So you can guide them to a better way. You're actually serving them in the process. And this is a very interesting thing for an emperor to be saying to himself about how he should treat other people. So show him, make him realize it, right? That's the recall it to mind. If he'll listen, then you've solved the problem without using or making recourse to, or you could say, making your tool anger. Ou krea orges. Orges again, anger. Krea is use, what it is that you're doing, how it is that you're dealing with the situation. So anger is not a good tool for dealing with people who have bad odors, or we could extend this to so many other things. Somebody is annoying in the sounds that they make as they're, thinking about stuff. Somebody leaves their things out in everybody's way. Somebody takes up more space than they ought to. Again, in a situation like public transit, or, they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing, like standing in the window and picking their nose or something like that. If if you see people doing this, just yelling at them is probably not going to fix things. Get them to see how it's not a good action, or a good condition for them to be in. And, if they're reasonable enough, they will change it, and you will have benefited them rather than just having hurt them, embarrassed them, made them angry in return. And so this is, it's kind of a funny example, right? But it is a very wide application to the kinds of mistakes that people characteristically make and the kind of offense that they typically give to other people within the fabric of their relationships, whether these are personal or, workplace or being together in the same room or anything like that. So there's a lot packed into this. And to bring this to a close, what he's saying here is use your rational faculty rather than relying on anger as a response or as a tool to try to get other people to change their behavior. If you want them to change, you've got to appeal to this rational part of them. And the only way to really do that is by using your rational disposition, your faculty of reason yourself.